The ornament sparkled in the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights, its intricate gold filigree shimmering as if alive. It was the final piece to complete the tree, the most important decoration in the box of family treasures. Caroline lifted it carefully from its tissue paper cocoon, holding it aloft for her children to see. "This," she said softly, her voice almost reverent, "was your Grandma Helen's favorite ornament." Emily, perched cross-legged on the floor with a garland draped across her lap, glanced up. "It's pretty," she said, though her tone lacked enthusiasm. At 12, Emily often hovered on the edge of indifference when it came to family traditions. Her younger brother Leo, however, leaned closer, his eyes wide. Why was it her favorite? Caroline smiled faintly. She said it reminded her of their first Christmas as a family. She and Grandpa Walter didn't have much back then, but they found this in a little shop. It became a symbol of their love and how they built this family together. She always said it represented us, all of us. "Whoa!" Leo breathed, reaching out a hand. "Careful!" Caroline warned sharply, her grip tightening on the ornament. "Let me hang it," Leo said, his eagerness undimmed. He hopped to his feet, practically bouncing on his toes. "No, Leo," Emily said firmly, standing up and brushing the garland aside. "You'll drop it." "I will not." "You totally will." "Kids," Caroline interrupted, her patience thinning. "How about we hang it together? This ornament has survived decades of Christmases. I'd like it to survive this one too." The tree decorating continued in a swirl of garlands, baubles, and bickering. Emily took charge of arranging the ornaments by size and color, while Leo zigzagged tinsel across the branches with chaotic enthusiasm. Caroline stepped back occasionally to sip her spiced cider, watching her children in the glow of the twinkling lights. Finally, only Grandma Helen's ornament remained in the box. "Here we go," Caroline said, handing it to Emily. "Why me?" Emily asked, suddenly nervous. "Because you're the oldest," Caroline said with a knowing smile. "And I think Grandma Helen would want you to have the honor this year." Emily hesitated, then took the ornament gingerly, cradling it as if it might shatter in her hands. She stepped toward the tree, Leo trailing at her heels. "I can help," he said, reaching out. "No, Leo!" Emily snapped, her hand jerking reflexively. In that instant, the worst happened. The ornament slipped from her fingers, its glossy surface catching the light one last time before it fell. The sound of shattering glass was like an exclamation point on the moment. It echoed through the room, freezing everyone in place. "Oh no," Emily whispered, staring at the glittering fragments on the hardwood floor. "Emily!" Leo wailed, his hands flying to his head. Caroline rushed over, kneeling beside the shards. Her face, usually so composed, was stricken with something Emily didn't quite understand. She picked up a piece of the ornament, turning it over in her hands. "This was your grandmother's," Caroline said softly, as if speaking to herself. Her voice caught on the words. "I'm sorry," Emily burst out, her face hot with shame. Leo chimed in, his guilt palpable. "It's my fault. I distracted her." "It's no one's fault," Caroline said, though her voice was thick with emotion. She set the broken fragment on the table and sighed. "It's just, that ornament meant a lot to me. It's not just about the glass. It's about what it symbolized." That night, the festive mood in the house was muted. The once jolly tunes on the record player sounded hollow, and even the tree seemed to have lost some of its magic. The broken ornament sat on the dining table, surrounded by tiny tools, tweezers, glue, and magnifying glasses. Caroline and Emily had spent the better part of an hour trying to piece it back together. "Do you think we can fix it?" Emily asked hesitantly, holding up a jagged shard. Caroline sighed, examining another piece. "I don't know. Maybe." Leo hovered nearby, chewing on his lip. "Can I help?" "Not right now, buddy," Caroline said, her tone gentle but firm. "But, Leo, please," Emily interrupted. "You'll just make it worse." Leo retreated to the couch, his shoulders slumping. Emily immediately felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it aside. Leo sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the shards of the broken ornament on the table. "I just wanted to help," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Emily glanced at him, her irritation fading as she saw his hunched shoulders and trembling hands. "I know you did," she said softly. "I'm sorry I snapped at you earlier." Leo's head lifted slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "It's okay," he mumbled, though a small smile crept onto his face. Caroline watched the exchange silently, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. There was too much at stake. This wasn't just about the ornament anymore. It was about making up for the mistake that had stolen a piece of their family history. As they worked, Emily noticed something strange about one of the shards. "Mom, look at this," she said, holding it up to the light. The shard wasn't just glass, it was attached to a thin strip of metal. Caroline frowned, leaning in for a closer look. "That's odd. It almost looks like a hinge?" Emily turned the shard over, and together they discovered a tiny compartment hidden inside the ornament. It was small enough to go unnoticed for decades, but now its secret was laid bare. "What's inside?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with awe. Caroline used the tweezers to carefully pry the compartment open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "Is that a note?" Emily whispered, her heart pounding. Caroline nodded, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. Written in her mother's elegant, looping handwriting were the words, "For my family, when they need it most. Love, Helen." The room fell silent. "What does it mean?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. Caroline shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know, but your grandmother never did anything without a reason. If she left this for us, it means she wanted us to find it." The mystery of the note lingered in the air, heavy with possibilities. For the first time that evening, Emily didn't feel the sting of guilt. Instead, she felt a spark of something else, something bigger than herself. "Maybe the ornament isn't broken," she said softly. "Maybe it's just starting to tell its story." The next morning, the note was all anyone in the family could talk about. It sat in the center of the dining table, the faint scrawl of Grandma Helen's words both mesmerizing and puzzling. "For my family when they need it most," Emily read aloud for what felt like the 100th time. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her brow furrowed. What does that even mean? When do we need it most? Now? Is she talking about us right now? Caroline stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her eyes fixed on the note. "I'm not sure," she said softly. "Your grandmother always had a way of thinking ahead. She was deliberate about things." Leo popped a piece of toast into his mouth, swinging his legs under the table. "Maybe it's a secret code," he said, through a mouthful of crumbs. Emily rolled her eyes. "Leo, it's not a spy movie." "Then what is it?" he challenged, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Why would Grandma hide a note inside the ornament? That's pretty weird, even for her." Caroline smiled faintly. "It's not weird. She loved surprises, especially at Christmas. She used to say Christmas wasn't just about presents, it was about connecting with the past and dreaming about the future. I think this note is her way of reminding us of that." Emily tapped her fingers on the table. "But how do we figure it out? It's not like she gave us a map or instructions." "Maybe she did," Caroline said, her voice distant. "We just haven't found them yet." Determined to uncover more, Caroline led the children to the attic, where Grandma Helen's belongings had been carefully stored. The attic was dimly lit, filled with boxes and relics of the past. "Wow, this place is creepy," Leo whispered, his voice echoing slightly. "It's not creepy," Emily said, though she clutched her flashlight a little tighter. Caroline pulled back the sheet from a large trunk and opened it, revealing a treasure trove of memories. Faded photographs, bundles of letters tied with ribbon, and small trinkets that seemed to glow with the weight of history. "Start looking," she instructed, handing Emily a stack of old letters. Emily and Leo sifted through the trunk, their fingers brushing against fragments of the past. A recipe card for Helen's famous apple pie, a Christmas card dated 1965, a pair of delicate gloves wrapped in tissue paper. "Look at this," Caroline said, holding up a photograph. It was a black and white image of a younger Helen standing beside a Christmas tree. In her hands was the very same ornament that had broken the night before. "She's holding it," Emily murmured, leaning closer. "But what's that behind her?" Leo asked, pointing to a corner of the photo. Caroline squinted. "That's the old bookshelf, the one we still have in the living room." Emily's eyes lit up. "Do you think there's something there, like another clue?" Caroline shrugged, but smiled. "There's only one way to find out." They raced back downstairs to the living room, their excitement palpable. The bookshelf in question stood in the corner, laden with dusty tomes and decorative knickknacks. Emily ran her fingers along the spines of the books, pulling them out one by one. "What are we even looking for?" "I don't know," Caroline admitted. "Something that doesn't belong. Something out of place." Leo's small fingers explored the lower shelves. He tugged at a heavy book, grunting as he tried to dislodge it. "Need help?" Emily teased. "No!" Leo snapped, pulling harder. The book finally slid free, revealing a small leather journal tucked behind it. "I found something." Caroline took the journal from him, her eyes widening. The leather cover was embossed with the initials HG. "This was your grandmother's," she said, her voice soft with awe. Caroline held the journal to her chest for a moment, her breath catching. "I used to watch her write in this," she murmured, her voice breaking. "I always wondered what secrets she poured into these pages. And now?" Her fingers brushed the worn leather as she opened it carefully. "It feels like she's here again." Emily leaned closer. "What's inside?" Caroline opened it carefully, the leather cracking slightly with age. The first page bore another message in Helen's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means you've found the ornament and its secret. This journal is my way of reminding you that no matter what challenges you face, you'll always have each other. And that's the greatest gift of all." They flipped through the journal together, the pages filled with stories from Helen's life. Some were mundane shopping lists, notes about the weather, but others were deeply personal. "I knew she kept a journal," Caroline said, tears pricking her eyes. "But I had no idea she wrote about this much." One entry caught Emily's attention. "Read that one," she said, pointing to a page near the end. "Life is unpredictable. We lose things, we break things, but the love we share is what holds us together," Caroline read aloud, her voice thick with emotion. Her eyes lingered on the next page, where Helen had written, "One year, Walter dropped an ornament, and I was so angry I cried for hours. But later, we glued it back together, and it became my favorite. I realized then that life isn't about keeping things perfect, it's about how we repair what's broken." Caroline smiled faintly, her fingers brushing the fragile edge of the page. "She always had a way of turning mistakes into lessons," she murmured. The room grew quiet as the words sank in. "So, the broken ornament was supposed to lead us to this?" Emily asked. "Maybe," Caroline said, closing the journal. "Or maybe it's part of something bigger." "But why hide it?" Leo asked. "Why not just give it to us?" Caroline thought for a moment. "Because your grandmother loved a good mystery, and maybe she knew we'd need something like this to bring us together." Emily sat back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Do you think there's more? Like more clues?" Leo's eyes lit up. "Maybe there's treasure after all!" Caroline laughed, but her gaze drifted to the journal. "Whatever it is, I think we're only just starting to understand what Grandma Helen wanted us to find." The journal remained open on the table as the family huddled together, each lost in their thoughts. The cozy warmth of the room felt almost sacred now, as if Helen herself were there, guiding them. Emily traced her fingers along the edges of the journal. "It's weird, isn't it?" she said, breaking the silence. "She knew we'd need this, that we'd find it." Caroline nodded slowly. "Your grandmother always had a way of seeing the bigger picture. She believed in preparing for the future, even if she wasn't here to see it." Leo, now perched on the arm of the couch, tilted his head thoughtfully. "Do you think there's more?" "What do you mean?" Emily asked. "Well," he said, gesturing toward the journal, "what if this isn't everything? Grandma was sneaky, she might have left more clues." Caroline smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe this was her way of reminding us that sometimes the answers aren't as important as what we find together." But Emily's mind was already racing, her eyes scanning the journal for details she might have missed. Something about the words, "life is unpredictable," echoed in her head. There was a feeling she couldn't shake, like they were standing on the edge of something bigger. As the room grew quiet again, Emily caught her reflection in the window. The Christmas lights behind her glowed softly, and for the first time, she saw the tree not as a decoration, but as part of the story they were unraveling. "I don't think we're done yet," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Caroline glanced at her daughter and saw the spark in her eyes, the same spark Helen had whenever she was on the verge of something extraordinary. The journal hadn't left the table since they'd found it. Over the next 2 days, Emily and Leo took turns flipping through its pages, poring over Helen's words as if they were part of a secret treasure hunt. Caroline, too, found herself drawn to its passages, lingering on memories of Helen's warmth and wisdom. But there were no obvious answers, just reflections, recipes, and musings that felt both profound and maddeningly vague. "Maybe this is all there is," Caroline said on the morning of Christmas Eve, her voice heavy with resignation. She set her coffee cup down and rubbed her temples. Maybe the note and the journal were just her way of saying she loves us. "That's too easy," Emily muttered, flipping through the pages yet again. "You sound like a detective," Leo said, half teasing. He was sprawled on the rug, doodling reindeer on a scrap of paper. "What if Grandma didn't want us to overthink it? What if the message is just, be happy?" Emily shot him a look. "Then why go to all the trouble of hiding the note inside the ornament?" Leo shrugged. "Because she was fun?" Caroline chuckled softly, ruffling his hair as she passed by. "Your grandmother did love a good surprise." But Emily wasn't ready to let it go. She flipped to the last entry in the journal, reading Helen's words aloud for the 10th time. Looking at the journal now, Emily felt the truth of her grandmother's words. No matter what challenges they faced, they always had each other. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift Helen could leave them. "There has to be more," she said, her frustration mounting. "What if it's not in the journal?" Leo asked, his tone suddenly serious. Emily turned to him, narrowing her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if the answer isn't here? What if it's somewhere else?" Caroline paused, her hand on the coffee pot. "He might be onto something," she said slowly. "Your grandmother loved to leave little surprises around the house. She used to tuck notes into recipe books or hide gifts in the tree. Maybe there's something we haven't found yet." Their search began anew. By mid-afternoon, the house was a flurry of activity as they combed through every room for anything that might hold another clue. Caroline rummaged through the kitchen drawers, muttering under her breath about Helen's knack for mischief. Emily and Leo scoured the bookshelf and the mantelpiece, examining each item with painstaking care. "Do you think she could have hidden something in one of these ornaments?" Emily asked, holding up a glittering silver star. Leo shook his head. "That would have been impossible. They're all just plain glass or plastic." But the more they looked, the more dead ends they seemed to find. As the daylight began to fade, Emily felt her determination giving way to disappointment. "What if we're wrong?" she said, slumping onto the couch. "What if there's nothing else to find?" Caroline sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes we don't find what we expect," she said gently. "That doesn't mean it isn't important." "But it doesn't feel finished," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Later that evening, as the sky outside turned a deep shade of indigo, the family gathered around the tree for their Christmas Eve tradition. It was time to light the candles, a ritual Grandma Helen had started when Emily was little. Each family member took a turn placing a candle on the tree's lower branches. The flames flickered gently, their warm glow illuminating the ornaments, tinsel, and garlands. As Emily placed her candle, something caught her eye, a tiny glimmer from deep within the tree. "Wait," she said, squinting. "What is it?" Leo asked. As Emily leaned in to place her candle, a flicker of light caught her eye. It wasn't the usual glimmer of tinsel or bulbs, it seemed deeper, almost hidden. Her breath caught as she pushed aside a cluster of branches and spotted the tin box nestled near the trunk. It was no larger than a deck of cards, its surface tarnished with age. "Mom!" Emily called, her voice sharp with excitement. Caroline hurried over, her eyes widening as she saw the box. "Where did that come from?" "It was in the tree," Emily said, carefully pulling it free. Leo clambered to her side, his excitement bubbling over. "Open it! Open it!" Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling as she unlatched the lid. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small golden key. "What is that?" Leo asked, his voice hushed. Emily unfolded the paper, revealing a hand-drawn map. The lines were faint but precise, tracing what appeared to be the layout of a house, or rather, their house. "It's a map," she whispered. Caroline leaned over her shoulder, studying the drawing. "That's the attic," she said, pointing to a section labeled with a tiny star. "The attic again?" Leo groaned. Emily turned the golden key over in her hand, her mind racing. "What do you think it opens?" Caroline smiled faintly. "Only one way to find out." Armed with flashlights, the family made their way back to the attic. The golden key felt heavy in Emily's pocket as she climbed the creaky ladder, her heart pounding with anticipation. They reached the trunk once more, but this time, Caroline moved it aside, revealing a wooden chest tucked behind it. The chest was smaller and older, its surface marked with scratches and faded carvings. "This must be it," Emily said, pulling out the key. Her hands shook as she inserted it into the lock. With a soft click, the chest opened, revealing its contents: a stack of letters bound together with a red ribbon and a bundle of photographs. Caroline's breath hitched as she lifted the first letter, her fingers trembling. "This is her handwriting," she whispered. Emily leaned closer, her heart pounding as she glimpsed the faint scrawl. Leo reached out tentatively, his eyes wide with awe. The room seemed to hold its breath as they realized they were holding pieces of Helen's heart, preserved for this moment. Caroline reached for the letters, her breath catching as she recognized her mother's handwriting. These are from Grandma," she said, her voice trembling. Emily picked up one of the photographs. It showed Helen standing outside the house, her arm around a younger Caroline. They were smiling, their eyes bright with joy. But what caught Emily's attention wasn't their faces, it was the house in the background. "It's our house," she said, her voice rising. "Grandma lived here before we did?" Caroline's eyes widened. "No! She never told me that." Leo held up another photo. "Look, it's the tree." Sure enough, in the background of the photo stood the same Christmas tree they were decorating now. The realization hit them like a wave. The house, the tree, the ornamented had all been part of Helen's story. "She wanted us to find this," Caroline said, tears streaming down her face. "She wanted us to know." Emily stared at the photographs, her mind racing. Helen's note had been right all along. This wasn't just a mystery, it was a legacy. The letters spread out on the attic floor felt like pieces of a puzzle, their faded ink carrying whispers of a life Helen had never fully shared. Emily carefully unfolded the first one, her fingers brushing against the delicate paper. Caroline's voice trembled as she read aloud, "To my future family, who I hope will one day find this. This house is more than walls and a roof, it's where love takes root, where traditions grow. If you're reading this, it means you've found the ornament and the journal. But there's one more gift I want you to have." Emily's eyes darted to her mother. "Another gift? What does she mean?" Caroline's lips parted as she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "In the crawl space under the floorboards of the living room, you'll find something I've saved for this moment. It's for all of you, to remind you of where you've come from and where you're going." Leo's eyes widened. "The crawl space? That's where the raccoons were." Caroline chuckled through her tears. "Not anymore. Let's go see." The three of them stood in silence, staring at the map spread across the dining table. "What if we're wrong?" Emily asked, her voice wavering. "What if there's nothing there, and we've been chasing shadows?" Caroline studied the map again, her eyes lingering on the tiny star marking the crawl space. "Then we'll have tried," she said softly, squeezing Emily's hand. "And trying is all Grandma Helen ever wanted us to do." Back in the living room, they pushed aside the coffee table and rolled back the rug, exposing a narrow hatch in the floor. Emily knelt down, prying it open with a hesitant tug. The hinges creaked, releasing a faint, musty smell as the crawlspace came into view. "Shine the flashlight," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo held the beam steady as Caroline reached into the darkness. After a moment of fumbling, her hand emerged, clutching a small wooden box. "It's heavier than I thought," she murmured, setting it on the floor. The family gathered around as Caroline opened the box. Inside, wrapped in layers of soft linen, was another ornament. This one was larger, its surface an intricate mosaic of red, gold, and green glass. It shimmered in the glow of the Christmas tree lights, as if it had been waiting for this moment. "Another ornament?" Leo asked, his voice filled with wonder. Emily's breath caught as she examined it. "It's beautiful." Caroline's hand shook as she lifted it out of the box. Tucked beneath the ornament was a final letter. She unfolded it carefully, her tears blurring the words as she read. "This ornament is the first one your Grandpa Walter and I ever bought. I wanted this ornament to find its way back to you when you needed it most. Life is full of losses and heartbreaks, but it is also full of discovery and connection. This is my way of reminding you that even in brokenness, there is beauty to be found together. We had to sell it one Christmas to pay for the house, but I found it again years later and kept it safe. I want it to remind you of what matters most: love, resilience, and family. Hang it proudly and know that no matter where life takes you, you'll always have each other. Merry Christmas. Love, Helen." The room fell silent as the weight of Helen's words settled over them. "She gave it back to us," Caroline said, her voice breaking. "She gave us her story." Leo looked up at his mother, his eyes shining. "Can we hang it on the tree?" Caroline nodded, a soft smile breaking through her tears. "Of course we can." With reverence, they approached the tree together. Caroline handed the ornament to Emily, who held it as if it were made of light itself. She stepped forward, finding the perfect branch near the top, and placed it there with care. For a moment, no one spoke. The ornament glowed in the warm light of the candles, its surface reflecting the faces of the family standing together. "It's like she's here with us," Emily said softly. "She is," Caroline replied, wrapping her arms around her children. Later that night, Emily sat by the fireplace, the journal open in her lap. She traced her fingers along its worn edges, feeling the weight of everything they'd uncovered. The chest, the letters, the ornamental of it had brought them closer to each other and to Grandma Helen's legacy. "This was her gift," Emily whispered. "Not just the ornament, but all of it." Caroline entered quietly, a mug of cocoa in her hands. She sat beside Emily, her gaze soft as it settled on the ornament shining atop the tree. "She wanted us to find it together," Caroline said, her voice warm. Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the journal in her lap. "She knew we'd need this," she murmured, her fingers tracing the faded letters. "Not just to remember her, but to remind us who we are and who we can be." Caroline tilted her head, her eyes shining. She believed in us even now. Emily glanced at her mother, feeling a newfound strength. "Then I think we have to keep believing too," she said, her voice steady. "It's our turn to carry her story forward." "Do you think she knew it would mean so much to us?" Emily asked. Caroline smiled. "Your grandmother had a way of seeing things others couldn't. She believed love always finds a way to shine through, even in the hardest moments." As the tree glowed softly in the quiet room, Caroline placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Your grandmother always saw the bigger picture," she said. "She believed every moment, even the hard ones, leads us to where we're meant to be." Emily smiled, her gaze lingering on the ornament. "Then I think she'd be proud of us, of how we found our way together." The warmth in the room felt like Helen herself, a quiet promise that they were never truly alone. Emily leaned into her mother's side, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I think we should make it a tradition," she said. "What's that?" hanging her ornament last every year, like she used to, so we never forget." Caroline kissed the top of her head. "That sounds perfect." The next morning, as the family gathered around the tree, the laughter and love in the room felt richer than ever before. Helen's ornament sparkled at the top, a reminder of her enduring presence. As Emily helped Leo open his gifts, she glanced toward the window. Snow was falling in soft, quiet waves, blanketing the world in peace. She smiled, feeling the warmth of something bigger than herself. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, her heart full.